Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Punching Up Movie Podcast. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, it's a podcast where two long-standing friends pick a movie that's either considered a classic, a popular classic, a cult classic, which is simply incredibly well-liked. One of us has an issue with it, and the other one, if he doesn't feel the same way, tries to defend it, and we just kick it about a bit and then just go off on various tangents. So today we are doing Guillermo del Toro's 2017 Oscar-winning fantasy romance of The Shape of Water. So, Damien, would you like to fill us in on the plot of The Shape of Water, please?
Yeah, I'll give you a little brief synopsis. Set in 1962 in Baltimore, Maryland, the United States of America, during the Cold War. The Shape of Water is a romantic adventure tale of a mute cleaner played by Sally Hawkins at a high-security government facility who falls in love with a captured amphibian, fish-stroke-human-like creature played by Doug Jones. We'll get into that. And tries to break him out of his prison when the evil Colonel Strickland, played by Michael Shannon, at his most dastardly, tries to have him killed. She sets up the escape with the help of her co-worker Zelda, played by Octavia Spencer, and her lonely neighbour Giles, played with absolute heart and humour by the great Richard Jenkins. And they do what they can to return the fish man creature-like creature back to the sea. And stuff happens in the middle.
Yeah. Del Toro stuff happens.
Del Toro stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit of background on the movie. Guillermo del Toro, when he was a little boy in Mexico, went to the cinema and saw, I think it was on the television, he saw The Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, the sort of black and white monster movie, Universal monster movie. And he was particularly enamored by the famous scene where Kay Lawrence, the heroine, goes swimming in the Amazon and is kind of circled by the creature. It's kind of quite a weirdly erotic sequence, and that had an effect on Guillermo del Toro. But he you know, the creature's a monster. It's the villain. It's killed. But he empathized with the monster and worried. I thought, what would happen if the two of them actually got together? You know, the human and the monster. And that idea stayed in his head. Many years later, he's a successful fantasy film director, and he wants to remake The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and so he takes it to Universal, who've got the rights, and they don't want to remake it because they're planning what turned out to be their completely failed Dark Universe sequence of monster movies, and so they sort of put the no on that, and so he comes up with an original idea, which is effectively The Shape of Water. He writes it. It takes quite a long time for him to come to any point where he can get them to finance it. So he puts a lot of his own money, which Del Toro does do. This is a feature of him. He backs himself, and he actually spends his own money hiring designers to kind of put together a kind of design of the creature, and to design the laboratory, which is like the central set apart from Eliza's flat in the movie. At the 2014 Golden Globes, he bumps into Sally Phillips, who's there having been nominated. Sally Hawkins, not Sally Phillips. Sally Phillips from Miranda, the Bridget Jones. That would be a completely different movie. It
would be a very different film.
Yeah.
Emergency summit with Urban Family for coherent discussion of career crisis.
Fuck them. Fuck the lot of them. Tell them they can stick fucking levers up their fucking arses.
Good. Yes, that's very useful. Very useful.
Shazza, journalist, likes to say fuck a lot.
Sally Hawkins, yeah, who's nominated for Blue Jasmine. Del Toro gets absolutely plastered, and sort of says to Sally Hawkins, I wrote this part for you, which he did. You know, and she's quite taken with the idea. And then he gets his financing. He wants to film it in black and white to honour the original, but Universal actually aren't completely against the idea, but they give him an ultimatum. He says, you can do it in black and white for sort of $17 million, or you can do it for color for 20 million. And so he figures that he needs the extra million, and so he makes it, shoots it in Toronto, assembles his cast, which includes Octavia Spencer, who basically says, "I will play a desk clerk in your movie. I don't care what I play." So and he gives her kind of a plum role, she's very happy with. The Richard Jenkins part was originally offered to Ian McKellen and was written for Ian McKellen, but Ian McKellen, because of scheduling conflicts, couldn't do it. And what he does, probably crucially in terms of the casting, is he graduates Doug Jones, who's a actor, mime, creature performer, who's played numerous monsters and creatures in his movies. Probably most famously, Abe Sapien, the another amphibian man in the Hellboy movies, and two monsters in Pad's Labyrinth, the sort of morally ambiguous fawn and the absolutely demonic pale man, the creature with the eyeballs in his hands in Pan's Labyrinth. And he gives him a romantic lead, which absolutely freaks Doug Jones out. He's very intimidated by it. And until he sort of decides that he's going to play him like a matador. So the physicality of the amphibian man is very much based on a Spanish matador. And there's various sort of design things which I won't go into. He's meticulous about the color palette. Each character is color coded. The color green is very predominant, and the color red, which is a reference to the red shoes. The film's released, and it's an enormous success. It makes $195 million worldwide, and more significantly, wins a stack of Oscars. I think it's nominated for 13 and wins, including nominations for sort of 3 of the cast. Weirdly, not Michael Shannon and not Doug Jones, but Sally Hawkins, Richard Jenkins, and Octavia Spencer all get Oscar nominations, and Guillermo del Toro wins Best Film and Best Director, making The Shape of Water the second film only in the fantasy genre ever to win Best Film, the previous one being The Return of the King. And it has gone on to become a beloved, not by everybody, there were lawsuits brought against it for plagiarism, but from about 4 different sources. The most famous of which being the director of Amelie, who said that basically you just ripped off my movie, and all of them, importantly, came to nothing. All of them were sort of thrown out of court. There didn't seem to be any intimation there was any intimidation or shenanigans, and the film has gone on to become a beloved fantasy classic. More so because it achieved Oscar-winning status. I have to put my cards on the table. I love this movie. I love Guillermo del Toro. I did not put this movie forward. There's one Del Toro movie I would have put forward, which we can talk about later. Damien doesn't like this movie, so I'm going to hand over to Damien to punch up, or put your hand in the water with a metaphorical harpoon gun and put one in the side of the amphibian man or the asset and have at it.
Yeah, put my hand in the very tepid water, I think we should start off with. I saw this at the cinema like everybody else and was just meh. I just was just okay. I was not really overly enamored by it. I don't think I felt very engaged by it. I didn't really buy the love story. So yeah, just had a kind of like as ambivalent, I don't know if that's the right word. I feel very ambivalent about Del Toro in the sense that I really do love some of his films and hate or just ignore, just not really bothered about some of them. Shape of Water is one of those. When I watched it again this time, I thought, I wonder if I'm going to feel differently. Spoiler alert, I didn't feel differently. I found it exactly the same. Thought it was very, very vanilla, very run-of-the-mill. No wonder it won loads of Oscars. It feels like an Oscar baity movie, even though it is set in the fantasy land. I think the pieces or the jigsaw pieces of the film are very Oscar baity. I find Michael Shannon's performance to be a little bit. I like Michael Shannon, but I'm now, having seen this again, questioning how much I like Michael Shannon. How rangy is he? I'm not sure. And I've seen him do loads of things, and I've really enjoyed him. I've never thought he was shit in anything. But this time round, I just felt either I felt the whole film's kind of underwritten. I think the character work predominantly came from the design and the actors themselves. Michael Shannon's a baddie by numbers, really. You know, like, yes, he doesn't like his women to speak. He likes to control people, and but I don't know. I didn't buy it. I didn't. He went out and bought a car, liked a certain car, wanted a bit of power. I didn't get on board. Um, Sally Hawkins. Let me rewind. First of all, I love cinema, I love films, and I really don't like slagging films off. The reason why I don't like slagging films off is because it takes an army to make a film. And so I'm totally happy and glad that this won loads of awards and Guillermo del Toro got all these accolades for it, and everybody got accolades for it because, you know, it's very hard to make a film. It's hard to make a film that bursts out. But as we know, and we spoke about before, all art is subjective. And in my subjective room, like, it's not my cup of tea at all. I like Doug Jones. Sally Hawkins, she's a fine actress, but I don't enjoy watching her for some reason. I don't connect to her for some reason. And I don't know what that is. I don't not believe her. I believe that what she's doing is grounded in some sort of reality, but for some reason I never saw Happy Go Lucky. I'm not a Mike Lee. I can't really be doing all the poverty porn stuff, him and Ken Loach. But I never saw Happy Go Lucky, even, which I think was the film that kind of blew her up into high acclaim, international acclaim, as opposed to just British acclaim, because she was quite big in England before that, I think. Let's see. Octavia Spencer, she's fine. She's great. She does a great job. I mean, you know, she got the Oscar for The Help, and that enabled her to have a great career. Again, brilliant, mate. I'm not a massive Octavia Spencer fan, but brilliant. I'm glad that she's had success. You know, like, I don't want to take any of that away from her. But again, she's an actress that I don't. The kind of films that she makes, or the kind of films that I see her in, are just not necessarily my kind of films. Um, Doug Jones is brilliant, but he is this creature in the shape of water, not just proto ape sapien. Like, does it not just look almost exactly the same? Is the design not, like, incredibly similar?
You look different.
Oh, do I? Perhaps my hair?
No, it's your eyes. I can see your eyes.
Yes. Just trying a new look.
Well, then Abe Sapien, Creature from the Black Lagoon, obviously going back to that sort of time. I get it. But I think, having seen a few Del Toro films together, I see lots of commonalities design-wise. When I started watching it, I did think, this is Amelie. Listen to the music, as the way it was starting, and I'd not read anything about the when you told me just now about the lawsuits that Jeunet had given. I thought, like, one of the first things I wrote down was Jeunet Caro aesthetic, you know, City of the Lost Children and Amelie, the greens, the browns, the hue. Also, the music, The Start by Alexandre Desplat, is very similar to the Amelie theme, or the Amelie soundtrack by Jan Tiersen, which is, you know, iconic and beautiful. And it sort of moves away from that a little bit. I don't think it's exactly the same as Amelie by any means, but it does share a lot of aesthetic. Old Hollywood stuff, them dancing around together. It's just not my cup of tea. It's a 2.5 out of 5 film, like, maximum for me. And I feel any of the darkness and any of the real rooted in sort of danger and truth that Del Toro had in his earlier films, which we'll talk about soon, is not there in The Shape of Water. It just feels like a sort of family film that, with a little bit of sort of bestiality, potential bestiality, sex in there, and a bit of naked Sally Hawkins, and yeah. Over to you, mate. I spoke a lot there.
You look really deflated. You're like that sort of drained all the life out of you talking about that. I'm so sorry to have made you
No,
watch
that's
it.
okay.
We could have done
Okay.
Pinocchio. That was when we were
No,
initially talking about
that would
this.
have been worse, mate. That would have definitely been worse, I
I did
think.
rewatch Pinocchio. I'll tell you what I thought about that
Yeah.
later. That
Yeah.
was what I would have suggested. But it's
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my goodness, where do I start? Well, I'll start with the things that you commented on the most, which is actually the two key bits of casting that don't work. And as it's a film that really um, centers around four people, and you could extend it to the Michael Stuhlbarg, the sort of communist
Stolberg,
leader.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it was maybe about five people. So essentially, it's a fantasy chamber piece, isn't it? It's sort of played out in interiors largely, yeah, mainly two sets. No, three if you count the climax near the kind of water, the actual kind of in the rain and the water.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Would it have worked if they hadn't cast Michael Shannon and Sally Hawkins? Do you think you would have liked it more? I'm trying to think of like
Yeah.
actors that
That's
worked.
interesting.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
was somebody else going to be playing Michael Shannon's part, or was it always Michael Shannon?
No, I think it was always Shannon. I think he always wanted.
Right.
I didn't read anything but I'm just trying to think of people
Yeah.
that have worked with him before. Let's say I'm going to throw in a
Ron
controversial
Perlman.
decision. Well, Ron Perlman, I think, is too brutish. He probably would have worked in that, but I think you need. Well, no, he's not. He's actually. I'm not saying that Michael Shannon's an ugly man. He's not a pretty man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have worked with. I think it might have been a bit too broad with Ron Perlman. I love Ron Perlman, but he's big, and I think
I
Shannon's a
think
subtler actor.
I think
Perlman's a
that
good choice, though.
Ron Perlman might have been able to just rein it right in. I think he's an actor of scope, and I think that with his brute bulkiness, and then reining it in and bringing a sort of gentle danger, I think that might have been more interesting.
I wish I could do something about this. I can't. I can promise you two things. One, I'll always look this good. And two, I'll never give up on you.
Sorry,
Because interestingly enough, the character, because Del Toro's one of Del Toro's sort of things is like sympathy for the monster. The human is the real monster, and you see that you see that in the captain in Pan's Labyrinth. You see it in the older boy in Devil's Backbone, and he does it right out of the gate in Kronos, and it's Ron Perlman who's effectively the real monster. He's a billionaire's nephew. He's absolute sort of kind of prep school thug, isn't he? Grown up to be kind of an entitled murderer. And he has that charm, and he has the scenes with the child where he's actually kind of there's that weird thing in Kronos where with the little girl in it. There's a scenes with him in the antique shop. He's talking to her, and it's sweet and it's threatening all at the same time. And so yeah, that's a good call. Maybe he would have been better. I wonder if I wonder if Del Toro just didn't want to go to the well too many times with Ron Perlman. Although he always looks for reasons to put Perlman in everything he does. Except in like maybe the obvious roles, because he's not playing Frankenstein's monster. Neither is Doug Jones in the new. It's Jacob Elordi, isn't it? And
right.
So yeah, that might have been an interesting and of Kate. Would Kate Blanchett have worked? Because he's worked with her quite a few times. Would she have worked? Is she too pretty to be?
I think Kate Blanchett might be a little bit too old. I don't mean that she's old. I just think she's probably like 10 years older than Sally Hawkins, and I think that Sally Hawkins. I mean, she was probably about like in her early 30s or something when she did that. I think the fact that she is a little bit younger works better. Not ingenue young, but not 40 something, lived a little bit more. Just that little sort of 30 something.
I've got one for you because. Rooney Mara, because he used Rooney Mara in Nightmare Alley in a kind of similar sort of role, very 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 sort of innocent, sort of innocent, threatened by kind of not threatened, but kind of manipulated by sort of predatory males. So would Rooney Mara? I think Rooney Mara would have been really good in that.
I would have probably preferred to see Rooney Mara, but like I think Rooney Mara's in that. I think she's also a very, very fine actress who I don't connect with. She's another one of
Ah.
those actresses that I don't, for whatever reason, it's not about finding them attractive or not finding them attractive. It's like it's just connecting with them on some level, like it's our taste thing, isn't it? And I do feel with The Shape of Water for me, it's not you, it's me.
Mm.
It's a case of that. Like I feel that it's definitely my sort of weird taste buds that don't. But then you brought up Sally Hawkins and Michael Shannon as well off the back of me, and so obviously you must have felt something as well.
I like them. I find Sally Hawkins. I'm not a massive student of Sally Hawkins, but I find her quite big in her performing in
Yeah,
ways that kind of
theatrical.
and I loved her in this because obviously she's a character that can't speak. She has so she has to rein in the bigness, and obviously she communicates through gesture, through her eyes, and she communicates with Doug Jones can't speak, and so language is kind of immaterial, although they kind of learn a degree of sign language together. I love her performance in this, and I understand it kind of hovers on the edge of whimsy, which I kind of understand can kind of like
Yeah.
really annoy people because she is kind of borderline twee at times. And there's the bits, and I
Mm.
was thinking of you when I was watching it. There's the bits where her and Richard Jenkins are sitting together and they're watching musicals, and they do the little
Yeah.
kind of tap dance sitting down. I thought, oh, Davey's
Yeah,
going to hate
yeah.
that bit. And then there's a full blown musical number. The one time she does
Yeah.
speak in a fantasy
Yeah.
sequence where she's singing and waltzing with the creature, and I thought, wow, this is
Mm.
this is this is this is 2 degrees away from being a full blown
It's my
musical.
kryptonite.
Yeah, this is kryptonite. and, I thought David's not going to like that. And the color scheme is very sort of technicolor musical or technicolor Douglas Sirk melodrama, and so everything's.
Mm.
I think it's a very emotional film as well. But it all worked for me. I like Michael Shannon. I think it's not radical casting to cast Michael Shannon as a sort of
No.
brutish psychopath, but I thought there was dimension in him. I thought his family scenes were interesting. That he has this really likable family, that he just seems to have absolutely no connection, no interest in him. The one, the one relationship, well, the two relationships that seem to kind of engage him are Sally Hawkins, but that's really dark. His interest in
Yeah,
her
for
is
sure.
yeah, and
Mm.
there's that very disturbing scene where he just talks about, and in his own mind, he's trying to chat her up, and then it just turns into something very dark. Where he talks about, "Do you
Mm.
people squawk? I hear you squawk." And then he goes, "I'll make you
Mm.
squawk," and it's horrible.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think Del Toro injects those levels of darkness into effectively a fairy tale because he understands the root of all fairy tales are kind of very dark parabolic stories that in their original root form are incredibly violent and I don't know. I like the fact that he doesn't. I think the majority of their, not all of them, but I think you get key human villains. Say the one he sort of relates to most. I think in Del Toro's lexicon of human bad guys is the officer, the captain in Pan's Labyrinth, and they both are righteous in their own brain. They're both heroes in their own mind, and Del Toro actually one of the things he told Michael Shannon, he says in The Creature from the Black Lagoon, you would have been the hero. And he wanted to
Yeah,
subvert.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
read
his
that
whole
one.
point with The Creature of the Black Lagoon is like they've gone to this creature's habitat. They're the aggressors. He wasn't going to
Mm.
attack anybody. He's just minding his own business, and they come there, and and so he's obviously subverting all of that, which I like. And I thought Shannon had a bit more subtlety. He's a monster. My favorite line in the whole film, because I do think it's a very well written film, is the last thing he says. His kind of
Yes, you
acknowledgement of the
are a god.
creature. You are a god. His
Mm.
revelation,
Mm.
before the creature ops him.
Fuck. You are a god.
Which is very satisfying, and I think it's a beautiful bit of writing, and it's a beautiful point he comes to where which has its sort of correlation in Pan's Labyrinth with the final words spoken between was it Mirabelle Verdu, and was it Sergio Lopez, the captain? They have this
Yeah,
exchange, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it opens on this kind of moment of revelation where he realizes what he is and he realizes what he's facing is, and it's just this one moment
Mm.
where he just knows what the score is before he's dispatched. And I liked him. I like the whimsy. I like the fact that, and this was a sticking point with a lot of people. People were just like joking about it. It's like the woman shags a fish thing. That's a bit
Yeah.
of a hurdle, and I think it's done very well. It's not, obviously he's never going to do. He's a tasteful man, Del Toro, until he deliberately chooses not to be. And I think I think the violence in his movies is really interesting. The way he choreographs violence and things like that. And I think in the middle of all of this, he injects these moments of darkness. Like the violence in all of his movies is really brutal. Almost like more brutal than you would expect it to be. And I think he does that deliberately. So I don't know. I'm just rambling now a
No,
little
that's
bit.
okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel I agree with you about the violence, but I also feel
mm,
that Shape of Water is the most toned down of those
mm.
violence. Like obviously, when we've just seen Kronos, we've just seen Devil's Backbone. I've just watched Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy. Those are the four that I managed to fit in. And apart from Hellboy, which obviously is an American, like as a studio film, but Devil's Backbone, especially Pan's Labyrinth, like the violence in that is extreme. Like there's some really brutal. Whereas I don't know, or if the violence is there in Shape of Water, I don't feel it as viscerally as I do in his Spanish-speaking Mexican films. For some reason.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, fair enough. The one thing I did like, which is a sort of Del Toro thing, is the disfiguring of his human villains so that they start to resemble actual monsters. Yeah,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
slitting of
yeah,
the face. Like I suppose
yeah,
you could say Ron Perlman's broken nose. In fact, he goes through
yeah, 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 yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
film
In
the
Kronos,
Kronos with the
yeah.
broken nose, but also you've got right at the beginning, which I think is quite an extreme bit of violence, where almost like the first time you see Michael Shannon is where he staggers out of the laboratory and he's had two of his fingers
Two
bitten
fingers
off.
gone. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, when
yeah.
he's tried to like electrocute and pacify Doug Jones, and then
Mm,
he weirdly sews them back on, and over the course of the film they get gangrenous, and people are
yeah,
commenting they're stinking, the place out,
yeah,
and then he has
yeah,
that bit where he rips them off, and pus is coming out of the wound, and and it's Del Toro using a sort of a physical bit of a human man to sort of fester or scar just to show you what he is. This is the physical representation of his actual monstrousness, where he's inviting you to find something that's traditionally repellent more and more beautiful as you watch it. And I think I don't know. I agree with you that the Age Sapien and the Asset look very, very similar. I think they're very different characters. I think the obvious difference
sure.
being Age Sapien is articulate, he's
Yeah,
academic, he's not a wild creature, whereas like the amphibian man or the Asset is wild. He's not he's not interested in sort of reading books and fitting in and things like that.
mm,
And in a sense, what he does is he's kind of releasing whatever Sally Hawkins is, just bringing her out, and it's like I'm wild, you're wild, let's be wild together, and things like that. Um, I quite like the way they do the love sequence. I think it's I could do with less, sort of Sally Hawkins pleasuring herself in the bathtub, but I
yeah.
see why
Unnecessary.
I see that. I don't know. I see that why that's in there because her life is regimented. Everything she does is regimented, and that's a Del Toro thing, isn't it? The
Yeah,
tyranny of the clock, the ticking clock, is a thing. Because Sergio
yeah,
Lopez in Pan's Labyrinth has his watch that is
yeah,
like this,
yeah,
kind of emblematic object, and she lives according to the egg timer, and she has to be at work at a certain point, and that all seems to break down the moment she meets this creature. So I love all these themes that are woven in, which is all irrelevant if the tone's wrong and you don't like the casting, and it's just a bit too much. Um, I'm trying to think. Well, what about the other performance? You said in your I made a
mm.
mental note of this. You reserved your highest praise for Richard
Richard
Jenkins. Yeah,
Jenkins,
Richard Jenkins. Let's
wonderful.
talk about Richard Jenkins.
I think I had seen Richard Jenkins before, but the first time I took note of him was he played the dad in 6 Feet Under, and from
Mm,
that moment on, that tends to happen, doesn't it? You sort of notice an actor in something, and then forevermore you'll remember, oh, that's that guy. So I've always loved Richard Jenkins anytime I've seen him since, but I thought specifically in this film, he was the most three-dimensional and the one with the most interiority, and pain and suffering and desire and need and
I have no one. And you are the only person that I can talk to. Now, whatever this thing is, you need it. So, you just tell me what to do.
yeah, I felt that more than any of the other characters, and I think that is down to how fucking good Richard Jenkins is, because it's not all written. Like, there's probably as much written about Richard Jenkins' character as there is about Michael Shannon's character, but Richard Jenkins has got a warmth about him. Michael Shannon doesn't have that warmth, I think, as an actor. I don't see that.
Which is why you cast him as that character, you know.
Yeah. But again, it's like, that's why I don't like it. I don't know.
No, but Perlman does have that warmth, doesn't he? That's sorry, I just
exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, Perlman has that. However, even in Blade 2, he's actually quite likable, even though he's utter psychotic, you know, and yeah. So I think he does have that warmth, even as a villain. He's funny as well. Michael Shannon's not particularly funny. He's funny.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think these are the reasons why I don't like this film. That it all feels like Hollywood by numbers. You know, the person that you should cast as far as Hollywood goes is Michael Shannon in that role. That's not interesting to me. You know, it doesn't do anything. It only becomes interesting. Like, I know it's totally out of character, but what if Richard Jenkins was playing that part? I know he's older and not necessarily, you know, not the same sort of casting, but it'd be more interesting. He'd find more interesting things to show you, I think.
Well, the thing that would back that up, because the one film that you haven't mentioned, I mean, we've just been throwing Del Toro movie titles around. The one thing that you haven't mentioned is Nightmare Alley, which I'm assuming you haven't seen.
I haven't seen it, no.
I would strongly recommend Nightmare Alley because you seem to be talking about a trajectory in Del Toro's movies where he's getting a bit softer and sort of backing off from the darkness. Nightmare Alley just is perhaps the darkest film he's ever made. It's got Ron Perlman in it. It's got you know, and Richard Jenkins is malevolent in it. So that would be really interesting. So if you watch that,
just for that,
you can see. Yeah, it's worth seeing because it's a brilliant movie and it's just phenomenal. I think it's one of his best films. And it's and I didn't feel that the first way I saw it. I kind of enjoyed it, and we can talk about this on kind of rewatches. I felt this, you know, I mean, Del Toro is one of my favorite current directors, but I've not always liked his films. But with one exception, I've always liked them more on a second or third viewing. And Nightmare Alley, I just thought was absolutely extraordinary on the second viewing, and it's there's loads of things to say about it. Front and center is a phenomenal performance by Bradley Cooper. He's absolutely, and he would have made a good. If you watch him in that, you see the layers of darkness and charm. He would have been a good Strickland as well. He'd have been a phenomenal Strickland. And to have someone that good looking, you know, ending the movie with that kind of disfigurement and those layers of charm that suppress a real malevolence, which you see in and you like him, you know, all the way through Nightmare Alley, whatever, and he does some despicable things in it. You're drawn to him rather than repelled by him, and you know the real dangerous. Well, there's lots of dangerous humans in it, but Richard Jenkins kind of in a sense initially comes across with that sort of warmth and gentleness, but he essentially plays a billionaire, a kind of Howard Hughes type figure who you know is at core a thoroughly evil man, and when that comes out. And it's mixed with pathos, it's mixed with tragedy. He's terrifying, you know. So you know, Bradley Cooper and Richard Jenkins. That's a really interesting sort of casting kind of what if call from you. I think Jenkins would have been, although the sexual element wouldn't have necessarily been as kind of threatening, because the big thing about Michael Shannon is he's interested in Sally Hawkins. He's interested in Eliza sexually, and he can't quite figure it out. and it just goes against the grain of everything that he stands for, which is kind of everything that's traditionally American, but kind of twisted and subverted in some way and stuff. So yeah, that would have been fascinating. What else? The thing that makes me laugh about, say, there's certain films that do have sticking points when you're trying to kind of like sell them to people, and this is one. Oh yeah, this is the woman shagging. Do you remember the film Teeth? Have you ever seen Teeth? Did I must have recommended that.
Yeah. I've not seen it yet.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to get people to watch that and explain.
Yeah.
If those haven't seen it, it's about a woman who has teeth in her lady parts and avenges. She's abused by men and then kind of avenges them in the way you would imagine that she does. And it sounds like such a sleazy kind of exploitative movie. And that's not the movie you're watching. It has all the elements that you think is going to be, but there's just kind of layers of pathos, intelligence in there, but.
Once in a great while, a film is made that haunts audiences for years to come.
I think there might be something weird going on.
The most alarming cautionary tale for men since Fatal Attraction.
There is something inside of me that's lethal.
Wicked.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna bite you.
Trying to sell that movie to anybody is just an absolute non-starter. And I think it might have wrecked the careers of anybody involved in it, because forever. I don't think anybody involved in that movie has gone on to sort of the heights that the movie suggested they deserve as filmmakers or actors. But and I think
interestingly,
I think there's a sort of snigger element to the Shape of Water that I think is obviously it made a lot of money. People went to see it, but there's still that kind of, oh yeah, that's that movie where that Sally Hawkins gets it on with the fish man.
Just going back to Teeth, I just listened to an episode or double episode of The Movies That Made Me with a playwright, Michael R. Jackson. He's like a Tony and Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, and he was talking about horror films that he liked and talking about John Carpenter. But he's about to make Teeth the musical. I think he's just made a musical in there, so he's about to turn that into a musical. So I just thought,
but is he going to camp it up though? Because it's not a camp film. It's quite a
I don't think. Not necessarily. I mean, he's apparently the show that they Joe Dante and Olsen went to see that he'd just done was they were raving about. They liked a lot, whatever it was. I don't know. It was a musical or something. So I don't know if it's going to be camped up or not. I don't think we're going to ever get to see it. It's probably going to be an off Broadway situation. But yeah, Teeth. Interestingly though, like obviously if you haven't seen Shape of Water by now and you've listened to all this, then and you're interested, then you should have seen it. She's not a human.
Yeah, and he brings that out, unless of course this is a death fantasy, which he implies, because you have a similar thing. I agree with you. I think she's not human. Whereas I'm not sure.
She's got the gills, mate. I mean, she's got the scars.
There's scars.
I know, on both sides, scars that have healed over that were gills. They're like, where did the scars come from? I mean, like, there's no explanation of that. It definitely pushes you into that sort of.
Well, they explain that she was found. She doesn't know who her parents were.
Yeah, she was found by the river.
Yeah. She's a fish. But
I was just being. So they get away with it. I don't think. I think it's a cop out.
Really?
Calling her a fish, like, go for it, mate. If you're gonna do bestiality, human amphibian sexual desire, then just do it, rather than we'll do it. Oh, isn't that shocking? Hey, guess what? She's a fish, actually. So it's fish sex as opposed to.
I don't think he's trying to shock people. I don't think he's doing it. I don't think he does stuff to shock. I think his thing is, and this is something that he does. He loves. I have to say about Guillermo del Toro, of all the directors that we've covered, he's the one I most love listening to talk. I think he's one of the most
I think he's a wicked dude for sure.
Poetic, warm, kind of funny, kind of culture. I mean, if you say compare him to Tarantino, they probably talk as much as each other. If you go on YouTube, you can find you just never get to the end of interviews with them. I love hearing Tarantino talk, but he effectively has one subject, which is movies. Del Toro's life is more interesting, and we can't really go into all the stuff he's experienced in his life as a child in Mexico. He's had such a strange upbringing, and his cultural palette is about as broad as any director. And he's to hear him talk about sort of gothic romance, politics, Goya, anything like that. I've completely forgotten the point I was going to make. I got lost in talking.
You were talking about
Oh,
how
yes.
out of all the directors, he's the most.
No, but one of the constants is he loves fairy tales, but his whole thing is like, why does Pinocchio have to become a boy?
I'm a real boy.
What's wrong with him as a wooden man? And if you watch his version of Pinocchio, that's what he does. He doesn't become a boy. He carries on being a wooden boy, and why does the beast have to become a man? He's more interesting as the beast. And so he's sort of playing that out. It's like, well, if she's attracted to, and it's kind of not really bestiality if he is a god, because it's like, it's like in a Greek legend, a woman
What's
falling.
that then? What do you call that then?
It's something new. It's something new. He's because he's a god. So she's falling in love with a god, and he's essentially sort of, putting his money where his mouth is, and goes, this is what I believe, and this is a love story. And all through this movie, what she's attracted to, she doesn't want him to be a man. She's attracted to what's there. And I think one of his big life philosophies is you love what's in front of you, and you don't try and change it. I think that's something he applies in life and in his art. And there's sort of beauty in perceived ugliness, and ugliness in perceived beauty, and we have to. There's a line in Hellboy 2, and he says, was it they, you love someone for their faults. I think Selma Blair said, I've mangled and paraphrased it, but there's a kind of verbal iteration of that in Hellboy, that she loves what he is. She doesn't want him to be human. She wants him to be, that's they clearly, she ends up pregnant. It's weird how no one kind of balks at that. I think it's because you don't see them kind of get it on, and it's so she's a human who can turn people. She can can set things on fire, Selma Blair, and she's in love with a half man, half demon. It's no different from this, is it? It's just
this fish is not half man though. He's full fish.
Whoa. He's humanoid, and he's sentient, and he's intelligent, and importantly, it's consensual. So it's not.
I think as is the Hellboy, is consensual, but like
that's what I mean. But it's consensual. He's intelligent. He's not an animal. He's intelligent. He just can't speak English, and he's like,
Yeah. I wish there was more. Like I watched Hellboy last night again for the first time since 2006 or whenever it came out. And I was so glad that they kissed at the end, like, because I'd forgotten, like, obviously that are they going to be together? Are they not? And I was like, I want to see that. Like, I'm into that. This is based on a comic book. It's pure fantasy. Whereas, not that Creature from the Black Lagoon / Swamp Thing / Shape of Water is not pure fantasy, but it's definitely set in the real world. Like a real historical world, as opposed to a sort of proto Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Nazis, and a cult, which is clearly. Is that right, or am I reaching there?
I don't know. You could imagine a world in which the asset and Hellboy kind of exist in the same, because they all take place in secret units that kind of acknowledge these things exist and deal with them. A bit more benignly in Hellboy's case, and completely malevolently in this, because they just want to dissect him and use him as a weapon and stop the Russians getting to him. And I think the Hellboy comics do integrate real history. Obviously that one of the main villains. We talk about like brutality not being absent in the Hellboy films, but I think the bit where John Hurt's murdered by the Clockwork Man is for a 12 certificate film, quite a dark sequence. Who was the Nazi? Yeah,
it is. But what I was thinking about those things, like, because what's the guy who kills him, the sort of the dancer dude, who's got the knives.
Yeah, well, he's essentially an old Nazi who's like sort of replaced bits of him with clockwork. He's a wind-up man, isn't he? But he's a Nazi from the Second World War, an old scientist, I think.
All the slashes of deaths in Hellboy are all very tastefully shot. There's nothing absolutely gruesome, and I understand you're trying to make a 12 certificate or whatever. You're not trying to make it 18. It's not Deadpool, but like, So I noticed that. So even like the knife going through the back of John Hurt in Hellboy is from a distance. There's not blood. You don't see the blood, the blade coming out really. You know.
But he doesn't. But he doesn't mask the idea. You know, someone's getting stabbed through the
No,
back of the
sure,
head,
sure,
and there's kind of less horrible ways he could have filmed that. He could have cut away, couldn't he? He could have just had,
Yeah.
he doesn't. So I think I think he's kind of very. I think he's very committed to the idea that children are robust and they can deal with a lot more darkness, and it's healthy in their entertainment to have that kind of safe environment to sort of observe a bit more darkness,
Yeah,
understand
I
about death,
100%
because
agree.
one of his big themes is mortality and death, and that we all die,
Yeah.
and and that kind of coming to terms with death. Um, but
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
a lot of kids die. A lot of kids die in The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, and like it's. I was talking to my cousin about this yesterday. He said he found the end of Train to Busan very upsetting because like the child had lost her parents and it was like brutal, and like the idea of like children going through brutalities in America we don't see that. It's so whitewashed. So and I think that's a problem, which is why I love all the early dark fairy tale Del Toro stuff, because it doesn't shy away from those things. And I think they're important, and they're also what draws me to cinema, because it retains truth. It retains something that's real, and we're not trying to hide it away from everybody. Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things he says, he talks about how he talks very articulately about how Mexican culture is geared around death. They obviously have the Day of the Dead, and the whole thing is like we're born, we're going to die. We live under the shadow of death, and that defines how we live. And he just talks about the Western ability to kind of absolutely sanitize, compartmentalize, and deny death. And so, yeah, and that you're right. That is a feature in his films, and that death, it can happen to anybody. And you're right. Lots of probably more children. I mean, set in an orphanage, but. Yeah, more. I can't think
Yeah.
of a film apart from maybe Terrifier 3, where more children kind of die in a movie. And obviously the ending of Pan's Labyrinth is I just forgot how
Mm,
tragic. Well, or is it
mm.
though? How kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah. It
how
gives you an
tragic that
out,
is.
doesn't
And,
it?
that's the ending where he plays on the ambiguity of
Yeah.
is in the final moments, is what you're seeing real, or is what you're seeing like basically her last comfort. It's basically like nature's gift to her, in that she's imagining this fairy tale ending as she's dying,
Mm,
and
mm.
you know, you know, disappearing to nothing according to Del Toro's cosmology. Because I don't think he believes. He's very strange when you hear about what he actually believes about, because he believes in ghosts, but I'm not sure he believes in heaven or hell. He had a very, very severe Catholic upbringing, which is kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doug Jones is a Catholic. They're really good friends. Doug Jones is a very devout Catholic, and they're mates. So I
Mm.
like the fact that they are friends. They have these dialogues. But yeah, but let's say that in his cosmology, there's nothing after death. The child dying, that might be the last thing she sees, and that's the last glimmer of grace to her, in a way, that she dies having experienced all the horror and tragedy. And
Mm.
then if that's not true, was anything true that she saw? Was this her way of just sort of um, ordering the world in terms of fairy tales and quests, while there's all this random violence and chaos going
Mm.
on around her in the human world, like visited by fascists who, let us not forget that all the fascists die. They kind of they go on to sort of rule Spain, for decades. So the
Yeah, yeah,
fascists
yeah,
win. No,
yeah.
they win. We don't
Yeah.
know. I was thinking, well, what happens to all these partisans at the end of the movie? They're probably all going to get hunted
This is
down and
Devil's
killed.
Backbone we're
No,
talking
no, no.
about.
This is Pan's Labyrinth. So Pan's
Because
Labyrinth
Pan's
is.
Labyrinth is 44.
Yeah, it's 44, but it's a fascist. It's still a fascist cut, and you still got presumably remnants from the Spanish Civil War, the partisans fighting
Yeah,
in the hills.
yeah, yeah.
And just basically kind of fighting like the like Geronimo and the Apaches at the end of the Indian Wars. They
Mm,
can't win it, but they're
mm,
they're
mm.
sort of they're sort of they're still fighting the fight, and with increasingly diminishing returns, they have this small victory, but the sweep of history is going to swallow them up until Franco dies, and then Spain starts
When did Franco die? I was really interested in that. I don't know enough about
was
that.
was it the 80s? I mean, he lived.
Wow, okay.
He lived well into our lifetimes, and
In power.
In power, yeah. And
Mm.
so his legacy continued, and Spanish cinema is only really starting to kind of deal with it full on, and so yeah. I mean, all these elements I think are present, possibly in a sort of, I was going to say, slightly watered down version in The Shape of Water.
Yes, sanitized.
And I think he recovers his footing. I think Pinocchio for me is a misstep, even though it wins him another Oscar and makes a ton of money. Nightmare on Elm Street is not Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare Alley on Elm Street
Yeah.
is a recalibration of his darkness as a filmmaker, and it is possibly the darkest movie he's made, and ends on a note of utter damnation, brilliantly performed by Bradley Cooper, which Guillermo del Toro actually singles out as possibly the best single piece of acting he's ever seen an actor do on one of his sets.
Okay.
And then sort of relaunches him into Frankenstein. So Frankenstein's going to be an interesting to see where he goes with that. Are you looking forward to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein?
I mean, I would be lying if I said I was looking forward to it. Am I vaguely interested? Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, Pinocchio. We'll do a little Pinocchio right now. Like 10 minutes. I got 10 minutes into Pinocchio and I had to turn it off. I can't watch it. I just couldn't watch it. It's too much for me. That's why I'm much happier watching The Shape of Water than doing Pinocchio, because that was painful to watch what I saw of Pinocchio. The music, Ewan McGregor in it?
Yeah, the cricket. He's J. Sebastian Cricket, isn't he? Not Jiminy.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Call it?
It's a clock. Don't match it.
What to do with it? With it?
It sings at 6 o'clock. No! Ah!
Yeah. I didn't like the music. I didn't like the singing, and I just wasn't on board. And I'm not. No.
I always go and see his movies in the cinema. That was that Netflix release. I went to see it at the cinema. I was really looking forward to it because it just seemed like such an obvious marriage of filmmaker and subject. I hated it when I saw it at the cinema. I didn't like the music. I thought the music was really annoying. The two things I really didn't like about it was you didn't get more than 10 minutes into it. So it's set in fascist Italy in the 40s. And what he does is he basically kind of abandons a lot of the big set pieces or minimizes them that you're looking forward to him seeing. So there's no sequence where all the naughty boys are turned into donkeys. And I thought, well, he would have done that. Maybe he felt like the naughty boys shouldn't have been turned into donkeys. They shouldn't be punished for that. They should be allowed to be naughty.
How do you ever expect to be a real boy? What's he think I look like? A jackass?
You sure do.
I love sea monsters. I absolutely love them. And so obviously you've got the monstro, the fish, the whale. And I thought, what's he going to do with that? And he just kind of fudges it. It's just like when they get swallowed by the whale, it's sort of thrown away. The subsequent escape and pursuit of the whale is well done. But if you want to see something like that done better, watch the original Disney cartoon. The original Disney cartoon has more magic and darkness in it, ironically, than the Del Toro film. The final chase with the monster takes place during a minefield, and sort of reminded me of how much Godzilla -1 does a similar sequence so much better, where there's genuine jeopardy and terror, and you're still kind of quite enamored by the monster, But in the middle, he just turns it into this sort of parable about fascism, and it becomes all about like sort of fascist Italy, and I feel like. Because the thing that he says about The Shape of Water, the reason he set it in 1963 is there were things he wanted to say about the present, climate in America, but because he set it in 1963, just before America lost its innocence, it's deliberately set just 62, sorry, just before the Cuban Missile Crisis, just before the assassination of President Kennedy. And he says this story wouldn't work after that because America changes. And so he's dealing with the kind of Eisenhower kind of idea of America that's kind of augmented by Kennedy. And he says you do something in the past and it sort of slightly blurs the lines. You don't feel like you're being talked to about the present, and it allows the audience. In Pinocchio, I just feel like the weight of what he's trying to say unbalances the fairy tale aspects of the film, and he's preaching to you, which he never does. I don't think he's a preachy filmmaker, and you feel that he's preaching to you in this middle section that absolutely sags the film. Weirdly enough, I found the first 10 minutes where the boy is a boy and Geppetto loses him really, really moving, and the last 10 minutes really moving on the second watch. And I was surprised. I was thinking, am I going to like this? Because I remember not liking Blade 2 when I saw it, and then I thought it was great on the second view. I remember actually not liking Hellboy to the Golden Army, apart from individual sequences. I just felt it was too childish. And then I watched it with children. I thought, that's what, yeah, it's for children, and it's a kind of grown up fantasy world for children, and I loved it. And Pinocchio is the only movie I've come back to of his and just disliked it as much as I did the first time, with the caveat that the beginning and the end are really, really moving. But what do you think of his attention to detail, his production design? You know, even in The Shape of Water, yeah, he's second to none, isn't it?
Yeah. He looks his aesthetic is beautiful and brilliant, and and that's why without that, The Shape of Water wouldn't have been, would have been much weaker, I think. But yeah, his design's flawless. And also, sorry, just going back to the Pinocchio and war element, like that's what makes Devil's Backbone, or Pan's Labyrinth more so, so fascinating. And and Devil's Backbone, the fact that you're setting it during like war times, but you bring it in like fantastical and fantastical elements, fairy tale like elements. I mean, I think with Pan's Labyrinth, it feels like that's probably his like magnum opus that was done in the middle of his run of making films. I don't know if there's another film in the list that I would have say is as perfect as Pan's Labyrinth. It's so well accomplished. But I really like war and fairy tales meshing together the way he does it in the Spanish speaking films. I think it looks amazing. So it's a shame that it tipped over in Pinocchio, but make it a musical. I'm tapping out straight away. It's that simple.
I agree with you about Pan's Labyrinth. Of all the films I watched, it's the
stunning,
for me the unequivocally great movie. And both scenes work. I think the war scenes work brilliantly. It's perfectly cast. The child is amazing. I really do like. I was so delighted when I saw it. Is it Mirabelle Verdu, who I remember from Y Tu Mama Tambien? She's brilliant.
Yes, that's where she was. Yeah, I've not seen that for years. Yeah,
and she's a phenomenal actress. Sergio
and
Lopez.
Also, Sergio Lopez is brilliant.
Yeah. He's. I think he's his best human monster. Even more so than Ron Perlman in Kronos.
Yeah, and I'd also with Kronos, like it's his first film. He's finding his feet. The guy who plays the Ron Perlman's dad is a bit shit. His delivery's not fantastic. Ron Perlman's great. I don't know how. It's a film that has like some fantastic elements to it, but it's not a perfect film. Like I think Devil's Backbone is a much more, and obviously it's almost like 9 years later that he did Devil's Backbone, is a much more accomplished film. I think from start to finish, I think Devil's Backbone is a phenomenal film, and I really like Federico Lupi, who was in both Kronos and Devil's Backbone, who died in 2017. I just found out, which was
and in Pan's Labyrinth, he's like the king at the end. He's like the fairy king.
Yes, of course. Brilliant. Yes, I agree with you about Sergio Lopez being his sort of most well-rounded, because if you had an actor like that playing Strickland's character, the Shannon part, I don't mind it, because you can be as dark as you want, but there has to be all those elements in place. If you just look a certain way, or you're just giving me dark vibes, you have to understand why he's like that. And I just never felt that I believed that Michael Shannon was rounded enough to, his performance was believable enough, or just well written, well dimensionalized, which was a real shame.
I've got another one to add to the pantheon of sort of great Del Toro human monsters. I'll come to that in a minute, but I just before we leave Pan's Labyrinth, how marvelous is the Pale Man sequence, just as a self-contained, even if you just release that as a short film, I think that might be the best thing he ever directed. It's astonishing.
Yeah. It's incredible, and it's really not that long as well. I know, like when you see it this time around, having not seen it for a while, you realize how quick it sort of goes. It feels like it's such a big sort of set piece when you first seen it, because has such an effect on you. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, mate. Incredible.
Yeah, and brilliant character work from Doug Jones as well, as the Pale Man and the Faun. I think Doug Jones. One of the things I love. I mean, there's a whole roster of things I love about Del Toro is his sort of elevation of Doug Jones to leading man status, and the place he gives him in his movies, and just the incredible sort of body work and character work he does. I think he should have got Oscar nominated, actually, for The Shape of Water. I think, considering there's all these things concealing, the normal tools of an actor, like his eyes, his voice, I think purely through his physicality, he communicates so much. And I thought it was a shame that he didn't. I mean, there's no way I'm going to convince you that Michael Shannon could have got an Oscar nomination, but I think Doug Jones possibly should have done. I think the film. Well, you don't think the film worked, but I think the film wouldn't work if he. I mean, if he's just a man in a suit.
I agree. I think that he emotes incredibly. I believe that him as a character. I think that it's just the other half. It's just the Sally Hawkins part of that love story that I don't buy. But everything that he does, I believe it. From he's not allowed to say any words at all, and yet you feel incredibly empathetic to this character, which is what
you can't even use your actual eyes, because I mean, you look at a silent performance. Yeah, if you look at say a silent but a comparably silent great performance like Boris Karloff in the Frankenstein movies, he doesn't speak in the first one, but you've got his eyes, haven't you? You've got his actual Boris Karloff's actual eyes.
Yeah.
Got those. His eyes are kind of covered up with contact lenses, so it's purely his body that he's acting with, and I just think it's an extraordinary piece of acting from a great actor.
And sorry, to carry on with that, he then went on to play an incredible character in the Star Trek Discovery series, where he gets like a lot of acting to do, speaking and moving, Doug Jones, and he's absolutely brilliant.
Isn't it? Saru.
Saru, yeah. He's one of my favourite characters.
Yeah, I really hate Star Trek Discoveries.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a big fan of Star Trek Discovery by any means. Like, I think I stopped watching it after a couple of series. I had big problems with it. Although I do love Strange New Worlds, by the way. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but that is phenomenal.
I haven't. No, I should.
That is really, really good, mate. Like, that has all the elements that you want, and it just puts it into the right place. And also, Star Trek Lower Decks is possibly one of the best animated spin-offs that I've seen, and I
didn't really like that either. I don't think I'm a massive Star Trek fan anymore. I think hey, this isn't about Star Trek. We can do Star Trek. We can do a whole Star Trek episode if you wanted. But he's all iterations of Star Trek. The one thing, because I remember I was saying like how I'll always watch a Del Toro film, and some I'm more on board with than others. But on a rewatch, I'll normally change my mind if I was a bit ambivalent. I rewatched. I mean, I'd sort of made my peace with this film, and I think it's the one thing I think that never gets talked about enough, that sort of comes kind of in between the films that we've been, The Shape of Water and then sort of subsequent films afterwards, is Crimson Tide.
I was going to say Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak, not Crimson Tide. I'm doing this again.
Crimson Tide's a very different film.
Yeah,
I would have liked to have seen that directed by Del Toro, mate.
Yeah, but underwater with the asset.
Yeah,
Crimson Peak. I remember watching it and really enjoying it. And then It Follows came out at the same time. I remember watching It Follows, and I kind of missed the point of Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is deliberately old-fashioned. It's reveling in the world of gothic romance with all the Del Toroisms, like extreme violence and a subversion of the sort of the Mr. Rochester, Heathcliff style character. And I remember watching It Follows, and It Follows was so kind of ahead of the curve as a horror movie, and was the best horror movie I'd seen for quite a few years. I thought, oh my goodness, the baton's passed. Del Toro is a little bit passé now, and this is where horror's at. And I remember being a bit disappointed that I felt that way about Crimson Peak. And then sometimes a film just gets in your system, and you kind of have to watch it again, even if you didn't really like it first time around. I don't know if you're like that. I was like that with Taxi Driver. I didn't like it when I first saw it, but it kind of got in me, and I had to watch it again. And the more I watch it, the obviously I'm probably like the only person who had ambivalent feelings about watching it in the first place, since its canonical status, and now it's obviously a masterpiece. But Crimson Peak is brilliant. And it starts off kind of its tone's very strange to start with, because you think, is this a little bit too much? Is this a little bit too twee and whimsical? But as this kind of darkness descends and the casting decisions kick in, because you have a very interesting Tom Hiddleston performance, and they subvert what you think he's going to be. But heart and center of it, I mean, Mia Wasikowski's very good, as you'd expect her to be. She would have made a good.
She would have made a phenomenal. Yeah,
because she's effectively done it before in like Alice in Wonderland. She's played these kind of innocent ingenues who enter these worlds and kind of feel more comfortable in these fantasy worlds than they do in the real world. Jessica Chastain is astonishing in
she's great anyway. I like her.
But she's particularly good in this. I think she nailed. We've talked about sort of shaky English accents. I think she nails the accent, and she is brittle, cold. And then as the film goes on, sort of gradually unravels, and by the end of the movie, without giving too much away, although I'm probably giving too much away, she's astonishing, and she's horrible, dark, twisted, but tragic as well. So I think there's an element of tragedy in all her things, but she might be his best human kind of antagonist in many respects. And again, you have one bit of extraordinarily horrible blunt trauma violence in it that just is shocking in a movie, essentially that's sort of treading the same path as sort of Jane Eyre and the Castle and the Monk and all these great sort of gothic, which is why I think Frankenstein's going to be interesting, because of the sequence which he's talked about in the Boris Karloff original, where the monster kills the child. You remember there's a bit where you've got that mixture of innocence with the monster and how utterly dangerous and destructive he can be. Where the famous instance in the James Whale original, where the child's throwing flowers into the water and he joins the child, and then he just picks the child up as if the child's no different from a flower and chucks it in. And one of the things Del Toro says, he says, I actually don't like seeing the child thrown in the water. And you think, oh, because you don't like seeing a child killed, that's unusual because you killed lots of children. And he says when it was censored, he said it was a lot more malevolent because you didn't know what you'd done to the child, and then you see the child dead. And so he says it's actually darker when you cut away.
Now throw a kiss and say bye-bye. Oh dear, nothing left. What shall we throw in now?
So you're going to get all the pathos and the sympathy for the monster, and I guess you're going to have a reclamation of like the Baron, who's played by Oscar Isaac, which is interesting casting because he's effectively played a Frankenstein character before in Ex Machina. So there's a bit of a callback there, and I guess you're going to feel less sympathetic for him, more sympathetic for the monster. But it'd be really fascinating to see how dark he goes in terms of like the murdering of Frankenstein's family, the Baron's family, and also whether he puts that scene in with the kid and does his own equivalent, and that becomes a talking point. But I'm really looking forward to it. And
when is it out?
Yeah. It's out next year. It's filmed. So it's out
next
20.
year,
no idea. I guess they'll probably be bringing it out in the autumn to kind of maybe as part of an Oscar campaign, but. I'm looking forward to it. Jacob Elordi as the monsters. Interesting casting. I don't know how that's going to work out. It was going to be Andrew Garfield, and I'm kind of sad that he couldn't do it because I thought he would have been. Because he's an actor you can't help liking. There's that awful
pathos
Sky
personified,
TV.
isn't he?
Yeah, he's just so likable, and he's just there's like I don't know if it sort of screens. There's a Sky TV advert that's screening in Britain, and it's a dreadful advert. But for the fact that Andrew Garfield's doing it, some of the stuff he's got to do is so sort of cheesy and queasy. But because he's doing it, it's a wonderful advert, and it's just a brilliant money well spent.
Nice. We've done everything pretty much Del Toro. Only thing we didn't talk about was Pacific Rim, which is fine. We'll talk about that another time.
We don't mention specific
Right. Specific Rim. We specifically don't mention.
People should watch this and play mispronunciation bingo. Drink a shot every time I mangle a film. So Pacific Rim. That sounds like a porn film.
I don't think I want to see that either, mate. The Pacific Rim. Next time you see us or hear us, you will be hearing the best and worst of 2024. That'll be the next episode, which I'm going to try and get this out and that out by the end of the year, 2024. And great.
Bang goes my Christmas holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Adam. It's been great. This is episode 21. We're getting there. We're getting up there, and one day we might even have 21 listeners. Who knows? So solid. But yeah, happy Christmas to everybody, and until the next time, from Damien in Australia. Peace.
Happy Christmas. Watch Teeth. That's my Christmas present to you on Christmas Day with your family. Bye.
The mission has been completed.
Groovy.